The phone rang, and the lawyer's voice was calm, too calm for the bombshell he was dropping. "Mr. Davies, I am pleased to inform you that the court has granted our request. All royalties for Whispers of the Forgotten Star have been frozen, effective immediately." My breath caught. Frozen. All of them. Millions. For a book that wasn't hers, not really. My hand, holding the phone, trembled. This was it. The first tangible victory in a war I never wanted to fight. A war against Sarah, the woman who had once been my friend, my inspiration, my nightmare. She had taken my idea, my heart, my very soul, and spun it into gold. Now that gold was locked away. I was Alex Davies, a nobody writer, scratching by, pouring his life into words no one ever read. She was Sarah Vance, the literary darling, the overnight sensation, the author whose face smiled from every bookstore window, whose book was clutched in the hands of commuters, whose name was whispered in awe. And every single word of that masterpiece was a twisted echo of my own unwritten dreams. The shocking part wasn't just that she stole it. It was how completely she devoured it, chewed it up, and spit it out as her own. It was a story about an ancient library, hidden beneath a bustling modern city, a place where forgotten languages held the key to unlocking dormant magic, a magic tied to the constellations themselves. It was my grand-aunt's rambling stories, my fascination with astronomy, my childhood spent haunting dusty libraries. It was me, and she had turned it into her. When I first heard about Whispers of the Forgotten Star, it was a casual mention from a friend. "Hey Alex, that new Sarah Vance book sounds right up your alley. Hidden libraries, forgotten magic, stars, totally your vibe." My stomach lurched then, a premonition, a cold dread. I dismissed it. Sarah wrote fantasy. I wrote fantasy. Shared themes happened, but then I saw the cover, a constellation map overlaid on crumbling stone arches. My heart hammered against my ribs. And then the synopsis. A young archivist discovers a secret library beneath a city she thought she knew, uncovering ancient prophecies tied to celestial bodies and a hidden lineage. The world tilted. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. My blood ran cold, a chill that hasn't left me since. Sarah. We met at a writing workshop years ago. She was older, more established, brimming with confidence and a kind of predatory charm. She'd complimented my early work, offered advice. She became a mentor, then a friend, or so I thought. We talked for hours, late into the night, about our ideas, our struggles, our deepest creative longings. I trusted her. I told her everything, every single intricate detail of the story that had been simmering in my mind for over a decade. I told her about the forgotten dialect, astral tongue, that allowed people to manipulate starlight. I told her about the protagonist, a quiet, introverted scholar who was secretly descended from the first stargazer. I even told her about the unique magic system, based on the different phases of the moon and their corresponding constellations. I spilled my guts. I laid my soul bare, because she listened. She asked questions. She made me feel like my idea was the most brilliant thing she'd ever heard. "Alex, this is genius," she'd said, her eyes gleaming. "The scope, the originality. You have something truly special here." Her words had filled me with a giddy hope. I thought she was encouraging me, pushing me to write it. I was so naive. Now that hope felt like a cruel joke. The memory of her praise, her rapt attention, twisted into something sinister. It wasn't encouragement, it was reconnaissance. She was taking notes, filing away every precious detail, every unique concept, every piece of my imagination. And then she went and wrote it. Not just a similar story, my story, and made a fortune. While I was still slaving away, trying to make ends meet, writing the next great novel no one would ever read. The lawyer's voice brought me back to the present. We still have a long road ahead, Mr. Davies. This is just the first step. Sarah Vance's legal team is formidable, and they will fight this tooth and nail. But this freeze sends a clear message. We have a strong case. A strong case. That was an understatement. I had years of planning documents, character sketches, world-building notes, and even voice memos where I'd brainstormed ideas out loud. Dated, timestamp, and the clincher, an email I'd sent her years ago. A full synopsis of The Celestial Librarian. My working title, asking for her feedback. She'd replied praising it again, calling it uniquely brilliant. That email was a dagger to her heart and to her bank account. I hung up, the silence in my tiny apartment suddenly deafening. The initial shock began to subside, replaced by a surge of something hot and volatile. Not just anger, but a righteous fury. This wasn't just about money, though. God knew I needed it. This was about justice. About reclaiming what was mine. About telling the world no, yelling it from the rooftops. She stole my idea. And now, finally, after years of silent anguish, someone was listening. Someone was doing something. The battle had truly begun. The thought of Sarah, of her perfect composed face, her carefully crafted image, filled me with a cold determination. She had built an empire on stolen dreams, and I was going to tear it down one frozen royalty at a time. This was going to be ugly, and I was ready for it. More than ready, I was starving for it. Chill of the lawyer's call still lingered, but it was quickly replaced by a simmering heat. Sarah Vance. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. I tried to push her face from my mind, but it was impossible. Her smile, so warm and encouraging back then, now seemed like a predatory grin, a mask for the calculated theft that was brewing beneath. I went back to the beginning, to the first seed of doubt that sprouted into this full-blown nightmare. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon 5 years ago. We were at the Quill and Mug, a small, cozy cafe that writers favored. Mismatched armchairs, the scent of old books, and strong coffee. Sarah had insisted we meet there. Inspiration, she'd called it. Now I saw it as a scouting mission. I had just outlined the core concept for The Celestial Librarian. I was buzzing with it, practically vibrating. It felt like the culmination of everything I'd ever wanted to write. I had my detailed notes spread out on the table, coffee rings already marking the edges of my precious papers. Sarah, always impeccably dressed, even for a casual cafe meeting, leaned forward, her elbows on the table, her chin propped on her hands. Her gaze was intense, unblinking. "So, tell me," she'd said, her voice a low purr. "The hidden library. How does one even find it? What's its purpose?" I launched into it, unable to contain my excitement. I told her about the city's forgotten underground rivers, how they formed a natural barrier, hiding the ancient structure for centuries. I explained that the library wasn't just for books. It was a repository of astral knowledge, of star charts that weren't just maps but keys. The L's to a form of magic that was about manipulating gravity, bending light, even briefly seeing into the past or future through stellar echoes. The magic isn't flashy, I remember telling her, gesturing wildly with my hand. It's subtle. It's about understanding the deep, resonant frequencies of the universe, about being in tune with the cosmic dance. And it's tied to specific bloodlines, the descendants of the original star weavers who built the library. I even described the unique way these descendants would feel a faint tremor in their hands when near powerful astral artifacts, like a tuning fork vibrating. Sarah listened, nodding, making those encouraging noises that made you feel like you were the smartest person in the room. She asked about my protagonist, Ilara. What makes her special? Why is she the one to discover this? Ilara is an orphan, raised by scholarly aunts, I explained. She's quiet, bookish, but with an insatiable curiosity. She feels things others don't, sees patterns in the mundane. She's got this birthmark, a small cluster of dots on her wrist that looks like a miniature constellation. It's her secret mark, something she's always tried to hide. I'd even detailed a scene where Ilara accidentally brushes her hand against an ancient scroll, and the constellation on her wrist glows faintly, unnoticed by anyone but her. We talked for hours that day. I shared my struggles too, my self-doubt, my fear that such an ambitious story was too big for me, an unknown writer. Sarah had been so reassuring. Don't ever doubt your vision, Alex. This is gold. Absolute gold. You just need to keep writing. I have no doubt this will be a bestseller. Her words had buoyed me, pushed me through months of revisions and more outlining. I even sent her that detailed synopsis, the one my lawyer had just presented as Exhibit A. She'd emailed back immediately. A short, enthusiastic note. Alex, this is uniquely brilliant. Seriously. Let me know when you have a full manuscript. I had saved that email. Why? Maybe because it was one of the few pieces of external validation I'd received for my work. Now, it was a damning piece of evidence. A confession in disguise. The discovery of her book, Whispers of the Forgotten Star, wasn't immediate. I was deep in my own writing cave, oblivious to the literary world's buzz. It was Lena, my sister, who called me, her voice tinged with a strange mix of excitement and confusion. Alex, have you seen Sarah Vance's new book, Whispers of the Forgotten Star? It's blowing up. And honestly, it sounds so much like your celestial librarian idea. The hidden library, the star magic, the girl with a birthmark. My blood ran cold. The phone slipped slightly in my hand. No, I whispered. No, it can't be. But Lena was insistent. She's doing interviews, Alex. They're talking about the originality of her world building. It's too similar. You need to look. I rushed to the nearest bookstore, my heart thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. The window display was massive, dominated by Sarah's smiling face, the cover of Whispers of the Forgotten Star, gleaming under the harsh store lights, the constellation map, the crumbling arches. My hands were clammy as I picked up a copy. The synopsis on the back, printed in elegant script, hit me like a physical blow. In a city where history sleeps beneath the streets, a quiet scholar, Lyra, stumbles upon a forgotten library, revealing a lineage tied to the stars and a subtle magic woven from celestial light. Can one girl unlock the ancient secrets before darkness consumes the cosmos? Lyra, my Ilara. Starlight magic, my astral tongue. Forgotten library, my celestial librarian. The very air left my lungs. I bought the book. I went home. I didn't read it yet. I just stared at it, the pristine white cover mocking me. Disbelief warred with a rising tide of fury. It couldn't be. Not Sarah. Not the person I had confided in, trusted, looked up to. This was a nightmare, a cruel, elaborate joke. But the cold certainty in my gut told me it was no joke. This was real. This was a betrayal on a scale I hadn't thought possible. The first flicker of anger began to burn, slow and steady, deep in my core. It was time to confirm the worst. It was time to read her book. The book sat on my coffee table, an accusing monolith. I kept walking around it, unable to touch it, yet compelled to. It felt like holding a mirror up to my own stolen reflection. Finally, late that night, with a trembling hand, I picked it up. The first chapter was a blur of familiar setting. A bustling city, vaguely European, that I had described in detail to Sarah, down to the specific architecture of the old town square. Then the introduction of Lyra, the protagonist. My Elara. She was quiet, observant, always lost in books. She had a subtle birthmark on her wrist, a cluster of faint dots. My stomach lurched. It was there, just as I had envisioned it. As I read on, the similarities didn't just accumulate. They multiplied, becoming more intricate, more devastating. Lyra's upbringing by her eccentric, book-loving aunt, who taught her to see patterns in everything. My Elara's upbringing, a specific ancient, almost forgotten language that only a few scholars could decipher. A language Lyra intuitively understood. My astral tongue. Concept of constellations not just as points of light, but as conduits of an ancient, subtle magic, passed down through bloodlines. My entire magic system. There was a scene where Lyra accidentally touched an old dusty globe in a forgotten corner of her aunt's study, and a faint hum vibrated through her fingertips, making the birthmark on her wrist glow. It was almost exactly the scene I had described to Sarah, the one with Elara and the ancient scroll. Not just the idea, but the sensory detail. The hum, the glowing mark. It was too specific to be a coincidence. Then came the hidden library. Sarah's description of it was so close to my own notes. It was terrifying. The hidden entrance behind a crumbling brick wall in an alleyway. No one ever noticed. The spiral staircase descending into cool, damp air. The faint smell of parchment and ancient dust. The way the library seemed to hum with a low, resonant energy. The sheer scale of it. Bookshelves stretching higher than the eye could see, filled with scrolls and codices written in the forgotten language. I flipped through pages, my eyes scanning for more proof, and it was everywhere. The antagonistic scholarly society that guarded ancient knowledge jealously, fearing its misuse. I had created them as a foil for Elara's discovery. Kindly, enigmatic old librarian who became Lyra's guide. My character, the old archivist, Master Orion. Even the specific challenge Lyra faced in deciphering a crucial prophecy written in the astral tongue, where certain words glowed faintly when she touched. This was a direct lift from my own unique magical interface concept. The heartbreak was physical. It felt like someone had reached into my chest, ripped out a piece of my soul, and was now parading it on a stage, claiming it as their own. Every unique twist, every carefully crafted detail, every piece of my imagination that I had nurtured and loved for years, was laid bare, warped, and attributed to her. This wasn't just inspiration. This wasn't parallel thinking. This was a calculated, audacious theft. She hadn't just taken my idea, she had taken my story. My specific characters, my unique magic system, my intricate world building, my very turn of phrase in places. It was all there, thinly veiled by her prose. The hearth-breaking part wasn't just the betrayal, though that was a gaping wound. It was the realization that everything I thought was uniquely mine, born of my experiences and imagination, was now public property, celebrated as hers. It felt like a violation, like someone had seen my most intimate dreams and exposed them to the world, claiming credit. My initial reaction had been denial, then anger. Now a cold, hard resolve set in. I closed the book, the heavy thud echoing in the silent room. This was irrefutable. This was proof. Before calling a lawyer, a desperate part of me still wanted to believe there was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I picked up my phone and called Sarah. Her number, once so familiar, now felt alien. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. I left a message, my voice tight, trying to sound calm but failing. "Sarah, it's Alex. I just read your new book. We need to talk. Immediately." No call back. I tried again the next day and the day after. Nothing. Silence. She was ignoring me. Her social media was a whirlwind of triumphant posts. Interviews, book sign. She was basking in the glory, oblivious, or perhaps defiantly indifferent, to the growing dread in my heart. The silence spoke volumes. It was not a misunderstanding. It was an acknowledgement she knew. She had taken it, and she had no intention of admitting it, much less making it right. That's when I knew. There was only one path left, the legal one. Path of fighting fire with fire, of revealing her carefully constructed lie to the world. It was a terrifying prospect, but the thought of letting her get away with it, of letting her continue to profit from my stolen dreams, was far more terrifying. Calling a lawyer was a daunting step. It felt so formal, so final. But Sarah's silence, her outright refusal to even acknowledge my desperate calls, left me no choice. I found Mr. Henderson, a sharp, no-nonsense intellectual property lawyer, through a referral. His office was surprisingly devoid of the typical stuffy lawyer stereotypes, more like a minimalist art gallery. But his gaze was keen, and he listened intently as I laid out my story. I brought everything. My decade-old notebook filled with handwritten ideas, character sketches, and world maps. The typed-up dated synopsis for The Celestial Librarian, the old email exchange with Sarah, and of course a copy of Whispers of the Forgotten Star, highlighted and annotated with hundreds of damning parallels. Mr. Henderson spent hours poring over my materials, his brow furrowed in concentration. He read excerpts from my notes, then from Sarah's book, back and forth comparing detail. Quiet hum of his office air conditioner was the only sound for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he looked up, a grim but determined expression on his face. "Mr. Davies," he said, his voice measured, "this is as clear a case of copyright infringement as I've seen. The similarities are not merely thematic. They are specific, unique, and deeply integrated into the narrative. You have a very strong case." A wave of relief, so profound it almost made me dizzy, washed over me. Someone believed me. Someone understood the depth of the betrayal. "The immediate goal," Mr. Henderson continued, "is to file for an injunction to freeze her assets, specifically the royalties from this book. This sends a clear signal that we are serious and that her financial gains from this work are under dispute. It also prevents her from moving the money, making it harder to recover later." He explained the process, the filings, the court motions, the arguments. It would be public. My name, Sarah's name. The accusations would be splashed across every literary blog, every news outlet. The stakes were enormous. On one hand, the possibility of justice, of recognition, of finally having the financial freedom to write without constant worry. On the other, the risk of a long, emotionally draining, and incredibly expensive legal battle. If I lost, my reputation would be in tatters. I'd be branded a jealous, bitter, attention-seeking failure. But the alternative, doing nothing, letting her continue to profit from my stolen dreams, was unbearable. "Do it," I said, my voice firm. "Do whatever it takes." The news broke a few weeks later. Bestselling author Sarah Vance's Royalties, frozen amidst plagiarism allegations. The headlines were sensational. My phone started ringing off the hook. Journalists, friends, acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. The internet exploded. The initial public reaction was a messy mix. Some people, especially those who followed literary news, were intrigued and supportive. About time someone challenged these big authors. One comment read on a forum, "The little guys always get ripped off." But there was also a significant backlash. Sarah Vance had a huge fan base. They were fiercely loyal. This Alex Davies guy is clearly just trying to cash in on Sarah's success. Read another comment. "Bitter loser who can't write his own book. He's just jealous. Ideas are everywhere." She probably thought of it herself. The accusation stung. I was prepared for it, but it still felt like a physical assault. My inbox filled with hate mail. My social media mentions were a cesspool of vitriol. It was a taste of the public scrutiny that was to come. Sarah's camp, as expected, immediately went on the defensive. Her publisher released a statement vehemently denying the allegations, calling them baseless and malicious. Sarah herself posted a tearful video on her social media, looking distraught but defiant. "I pour my heart and soul into my work," she cried, her voice trembling. "To have my integrity questioned like this, it's devastating. I have always created my own original stories. This is an attack on my career, my art, everything I've worked for." Her performance was convincing. Her fans rallied around her, sending waves of support and equally vicious attacks my way. It was a brutal PR war, and I, a lone individual, felt utterly outmatched against a well-oiled publishing machine. Then came Mr. Henderson's call again, the one from the beginning of this nightmare. "Mr. Davies, I am pleased to inform you that the court has granted our request. All royalties for Whispers of the Forgotten Star have been frozen, effective immediately." That phone call, that single piece of news, cut through the noise, the doubt, the public scorn. It wasn't just a legal maneuver, it was a validation. A judge, after reviewing the initial evidence, had agreed that my claim had enough merit to warrant such a drastic action. It meant my story wasn't just my angry accusation, it was a legitimate claim. The public reaction shifted, subtly but surely. The bitter loser narrative began to fray. "If the court froze her money, there must be something to it," I saw one comment say. "Judges don't do that lightly." It wasn't a full turnaround, but it was a crack in Sarah's carefully constructed facade. I knew this was just the first skirmish. The real battle, the one that would determine everything, was yet to come. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope, a surge of power. I wasn't alone anymore. And Sarah Vance, for all her fame and fortune, was finally starting to feel the consequences of her actions. The war had officially begun. The immediate aftermath of the royalty freeze was a media frenzy. My name, once unknown outside of a small circle of aspiring writers, was now plastered across every news site, every literary podcast, every social media feed. It was a bizarre kind of fame, built entirely on accusation and public scrutiny. And it was agonizing. The Reddit-style aspect of this whole saga truly came alive in these weeks. Online forums dedicated to books and publishing were ablaze. Threads dissected every aspect of the case. ATA for suing a best-selling author was a joke I saw more than once, but it felt terrifyingly real. There were subthreads dedicated to evidence, where users painstakingly compared excerpts from Sarah's book with snippets of my own publicly available blog posts or old writing group submissions. It was like living in a constant, brutal public trial. The vicious attacks intensified. My personal details, scraped from old forgotten profiles, started appearing in line. My modest apartment, my previous failed attempts at publishing, even old photographs of me looking awkward and hopeful at writing events. "Look at this guy," one commenter wrote, under a blurry photo of me from a decade ago. Clearly just wants a piece of her pie. Probably never wrote anything good in his life. Sarah's PR machine was working overtime. They painted me as a manipulative opportunist, a frustrated writer trying to take down a successful woman. Her social media accounts were filled with messages of support from other prominent authors, editors, and agents, all vouching for her integrity, her unwavering dedication to her craft. It was a powerful, coordinated attack. And I was just Alex, with my single lawyer and my burning sense of injustice. My mental state began to fray. I stopped sleeping properly. Every notification on my phone sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I found myself obsessively refreshing news feeds, even though every article and comment felt like a fresh cut. The isolation was immense. I couldn't write. The very thought of words, of stories, now triggered a nauseating mix of fear and anger. My own creativity, the wellspring of my being, felt poisoned. Friends tried to offer support, but even they struggled. Some were unwavering, furious on my behalf. How could she do this, Alex? We all knew how much that story meant to you. But others, more distant acquaintances, started to subtly pull away. I overheard whispers, caught strange looks. Was I truly just a bitter failure? Was I imagining things? Insidious nature of public doubt began to creep into my own mind. Lena, my sister, was my rock. She was on the phone with me daily, sometimes just sitting in silence while I stared blankly at the wall. Don't read the comments, Alex, she'd plead. They don't know you. They don't know the truth. But it was like telling someone not to breathe. The urge to see what new lie was being spun about me was overwhelming. The financial toll, too, started to mount. Mr. Henderson's fees, while reasonable for such a high-stakes case, were not insignificant. Every bill was a stark reminder of how much I was risking. What if I lost? What if this all came to nothing? Would I ever recover? Would I ever be able to write again, free from the shadow of this brutal battle? The thought of quitting crossed my mind more than once. Just drop the lawsuit. Let her have her tainted millions and try to rebuild my life, my creative spirit, somewhere far away from the glare of the media. But then I'd look at my old notebooks, open my dusty laptop to the folders filled with my original concepts, and the rage would return, hot and unyielding. This wasn't just about money. It was about my identity as a writer, about the fundamental act of creation. If she could just take my ideas, my characters, my unique world, and brand them as her own. What did that say about the value of originality? What did it say about my value? One particularly nasty article ran a headline, "Is Alex Davies just another jealous wannabe?" It included quotes from anonymous industry insiders who suggested I had a history of borrowing ideas or being overly competitive. It was a complete fabrication, a smear campaign designed to delegitimize me. But it landed. It spread. And it hurt. I felt like I was drowning, pulled under by a relentless tide of negativity. Sarah Vance, meanwhile, continued her triumphant book tour, her public appearances carefully curated to show a woman of grace and dignity, unjustly persecuted. She rarely mentioned me directly, always referring to the allegations with a sad, knowing look. Her performance was must, but beneath the surface of my despair, a new kind of resolve was hardening. This wasn't just a legal fight anymore. It was a fight for my reputation, for my artistic soul, for the very integrity of creativity itself. They wanted to break me. They wanted me to give up. But the more they pushed, the more I dug in. They had no idea how deeply the story was rooted in me, how much it meant. They had no idea how far I was willing to go to prove it. The pain of the backlash was immense, but it was also a crucible, hardening my resolve. I wouldn't let them win. I couldn't. The relentless public scrutiny, the online harassment, the subtle doubts from even well-meaning acquaintances, it was all chipping away at me. But instead of breaking, it honed my focus. If they wanted to prove I was a liar, I would bury them in truth. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, needed more than just the obvious parallels in the book. He needed irrefutable, undeniable proof of my prior conception and sharing of the ideas. I became a detective in my own life. I started with my old hard drives. Every file, every backup. I unearthed folders from years ago labeled Celestial Librarian Research, Elara Character Arc, Astral Tongue Grammar. These weren't just notes. They were detailed, time-stamped documents. I found an early version of my manuscript. Just a few chapters, but clearly laying out the core concepts, dated years before Sarah's book was even announced. Then came the digital footprint. My email archives were a goldmine. Beyond the single email to Sarah with a full synopsis, I found other exchanges. Inksty Savalice and group friends where I'd brainstormed specific plot points, described characters, detailed the magic system. Some of those friends were willing to provide sworn statements. They remembered me talking about these ideas, sometimes years before Sarah's book appeared. One particular treasure trove was an old, forgotten voice recorder app on my phone. I used to use it to capture ideas when I was out walking, or when inspiration struck in the middle of the night. Skewing through hundreds of short audio files, I found it, a recording from a park bench nearly 6 years ago. My voice, full of sleepy enthusiasm, sketching out the concept of the hidden library beneath the city, the Star Weavers, the birthmark. Imagine a girl, I whispered to the recorder, who feels the stars calling to her, a secret in her blood, literally in her skin. It was raw, unpolished, but unmistakably my voice, my ideas. Years before Sarah's book hit the shelves, I also remembered a specific shared space. We had attended a small intensive writing retreat in a remote cabin upstate a year before the Quill and Mug meeting. It was a week-long immersion, with late-night discussions around a crackling fire. I distinctly remembered sharing the nascent idea for the Celestial Librarian with Sarah and a few other attendees one evening. I had even drawn a rough map of the hidden library on a napkin, which Sarah had commented on. Could I find that napkin? Unlikely. But the other attendees. There were only 5 of us. I reached out to them. 2 were vague, claiming not to remember specific ideas from so long ago. But the third, an older woman named Eleanor, a poet with a sharp mind and an even sharper memory, remembered. Eleanor was a godsend. She recalled my passion for the concept, the way I spoke about the cosmic dance and the Star Weavers. She even remembered Sarah's intense interest, how she had asked detailed questions about the magic system, about the lineage of the protagonist. Sarah was quite taken with your idea, Alex, Eleanor said to me over a video call, her eyes kind. She even mentioned it to me the next morning, saying how fresh and original it was. She said she wished she'd thought of something like it. A cold spike of vindication shot through me. This was it. Not just her initial email, but an independent witness confirming Sarah's prior knowledge and admiration of my idea. Eleanor agreed to provide an affidavit. Her testimony, combined with my meticulously dated materials, was a smoking gun. Mr. Henderson was elated. This changes everything, Alex. The voice memo, Eleanor's testimony, this moves us beyond circumstantial to overwhelming. We can prove not only that you conceived it first, but that she was directly exposed to your detailed concept, and then proceeded to write something virtually identical. The hope that had been a tiny flickering flame in the darkness now flared into a roaring bonfire. This wasn't just about the royalties anymore. It was about proving my truth, about clearing my name, about setting the record straight. The emotional weight of the accusations, the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety. It all started to feel worth it. I felt a renewed surge of creative energy too. Ironically, for months, I hadn't been able to string two words together. But now, with the weight of proof on my side, a faint whisper of a new story, completely unrelated to the celestial librarian, started to form in my mind. It was a fragile thing, but it was there. A promise of a future where my words would truly be my own. The legal battle would be fierce. Sarah's lawyers would fight even harder now that the stakes were so high. But I was ready. I had my truth, backed by concrete evidence and the testimony of those who knew. The tide was turning, and Sarah Vance was about to learn that some things, like original ideas, cannot be stolen without consequence. The legal process, once a confusing labyrinth, now felt like a slow but powerful machine grinding towards justice. The discovery phase was in full swing, and it meant deposition. Sarah Vance would have to sit under oath and answer questions about her creative process, her inspiration, her interactions with me. I wasn't in the room for her deposition, but Mr. Henderson relayed the details, and they were damning. Sarah's attempts to explain away the similarities were increasingly convoluted. She claimed she'd forgotten our cafe meeting. She said my email was just a casual exchange, and she skimmed the synopsis. She denied ever hearing about the specific magic system or the birthmark detail from me. When confronted with Eleanor's testimony, she became flustered, stammering that Eleanor was mistaken or misremembered. Her lies were flimsy, transparent, and under oath, they seemed to crumble under the slightest pressure. Mr. Henderson described her demeanor as a mix of indignant denial and thinly veiled panic. Her carefully constructed public image, that of the gracious, unjustly persecuted author, was dissolving under the intense scrutiny of the legal process. She was cornered, and the pressure was immense. Even though I was not present, I could almost feel her discomfort, her growing desperation. While Alex was the victim and my focus was on my own vindication, I couldn't help but register the subtle implications of her struggle. The media, though still largely controlled by her PR machine, started reporting on the contentious deposition, noting that Sarah Vance seemed unusually evasive. The public shifted again. Skepticism about my claim turned into curiosity, then into whispers of doubt about Sarah's integrity. The bitter loser narrative was losing its grip. My resolve, which had been hardening through the backlash, now felt like solid steel. This wasn't just about proving I was right. It was about exposing the truth of Sarah's actions. It wasn't about vengeance, but about integrity. I wasn't just fighting for financial compensation, though that was undeniably important. I was fighting for the very soul of my creative work, for the idea that intellectual property holds value, that hard work and originality deserve respect. The emotional toll remained heavy, but it was different now. The pain was mixed with a growing sense of vindication. Each piece of evidence, each fumbled lie from Sarah was a small victory. It validated my long-held anguish, telling me that I wasn't crazy, that my feelings of betrayal were justified. I started attending the court hearings, sitting quietly in the back, observing. Sarah was always there, impeccably dressed, her face a carefully composed mask. But I could see it, in the rigidity of her shoulders, the way her eyes darted nervously, the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched a water bottle. She was cracking under the pressure. The weight of her deception was finally crushing her. One day, during a break, I saw her arguing quietly with her lawyer in the hallway. Her voice, usually so smooth and confident, was sharp, almost frantic. I couldn't make out the words, but the tension was palpable. She looked exhausted, her usual vibrant energy dimmed. It wasn't a moment of gloating for me, but rather a somber acknowledgement of the high cost of her choices. She had everything, and now it was all at risk. My own lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was methodical and relentless. He meticulously built the case, stacking the evidence like bricks in an unassailable wall. The voice memos, the dated drafts, the corroborating testimony from Eleanor and other friends. It was all being compiled into an undeniable narrative. The media started to pick up on the substance of the case, not just the sensational headlines. Legal analysts discussed the strength of my evidence. Literary critics, who had initially praised Sarah's originality, now began to reevaluate her work. Some even publishing articles comparing specific passages from her book to my publicly available conceptual outlines from years prior. The shift was slow, but it was happening. The tide was turning against Sarah. I felt a strange sense of clarity amidst the chaos. I wasn't consumed by anger anymore. Not entirely. It was still there, but it was tempered by a profound understanding of the situation. This was bigger than just me and Sarah. It was about the principles of artistic ownership, about the line between inspiration and theft. The next phase was looming, either a settlement negotiation or a full trial. I knew Sarah's team would be desperate to avoid a public trial, where all her carefully constructed lies would be exposed to the world. They would likely make an offer, and I would have a decision to make. A hard one. Just as the legal battle seemed to be solidifying into a predictable trajectory of evidence versus denial, a shocking new detail emerged. It wasn't about the plagiarism itself, but about Sarah. A deeper, darker secret surfaced, one that complicated everything I thought I knew about her motivations. Mr. Henderson called me, his voice unusually somber. "Alex, we've uncovered something during discovery. It's not directly related to the copyright, but it explains a lot about Sarah Vance's desperation for a hit, and why she might have taken such a risk." He explained that Sarah Vance, despite her public persona of effortless success, had been in severe financial distress for years before Whispers of the Forgotten Star became a hit. Her previous books, while critically acclaimed, had never sold particularly well. She'd made bad investments, had a huge amount of medical debt from a long-term illness in her family, and was on the brink of losing her home and her literary career. She had signed a punishing last-chance contract with her publisher, essentially betting everything on her next book. If it flopped, she was done, not just professionally, but personally ruined. She deserved it. This explained her ruthlessness. But then, a more complex emotion began to settle in: pity. Not for her, the thief, but for the human being driven to such a desperate act. It didn't excuse her, not in the slightest. The betrayal remained, but it added a layer of profound sadness to her story. She wasn't just a greedy opportunist. She was a woman drowning, clutching at any lifeline, even if it meant stealing someone else's. Mr. Henderson continued, "This information isn't directly admissible to prove copyright infringement, but it speaks to motive. It paints a picture of extreme desperation. Her lawyers are aware we know this. It gives us leverage." This new revelation spun my internal compass. The clean lines of my initial fury blurred. Good versus evil suddenly had shades of gray. I had seen her as a cartoon villain, a purely malicious force. Now I saw a person, flawed and broken, driven to an unforgivable act by the crushing weight of her own personal failures and financial ruin. It raised new questions. Did her desperation make her actions less reprehensible? But did it make them more understandable? In a tragic human way? Perhaps. The thought disturbed me. I didn't want to empathize with her. I wanted justice. Pure, unadulterated justice. But this twist made it messy. The news of Sarah's financial woes also leaked. Not from my side, but likely from within her own publisher, who might have been trying to put pressure on her for a settlement. The public reaction was mixed. Some felt sympathy, some saw it as another excuse. But it definitely complicated her image as the innocent victim. The narrative shifted from bitter writer versus successful author to plagiarism in the face of financial ruin. It was a juicier, more complex story, and it kept the media spotlight firmly on the case. The stakes escalated even further. If we went to trial and this information came out, her reputation would be utterly destroyed. Not just as a plagiarist, but as someone who lived a lie. Her career would be over, her financial situation completely exposed. It would be a total public annihilation. Shortly after this revelation, her legal team made a formal settlement offer. It was substantial. A significant portion of the royalties, a public acknowledgement of my contribution to the concept, and a non-disclosure agreement that would keep the full extent of her desperation out of the public record. It was a tempting offer. It would end a brutal, ongoing media circus. It would provide financial security, freeing me to write without the constant pressure. It would spare both of us a long, draining trial. But it wouldn't be a complete victory. Contribution to the concept wasn't stolen my novel. And the non-disclosure agreement meant the full, ugly truth of her desperation and the depth of her theft would remain largely hidden. I wrestled with a decision. My lawyer advised me to consider it seriously. A settlement avoids the risk of trial, Alex, and it guarantees a resolution, money in your pocket, and peace of mind. A trial is a gamble. Even with strong evidence, juries can be unpredictable. My initial anger still wanted to see her destroyed, to see her public facade utterly shattered. But the new information, the unexpected glimpse into her brokenness, made me pause. Did I want to completely ruin another human being, even one who had wronged me so profoundly? Did I want to win at any cost, even if it meant stripping her bare in front of the world? The internal conflict was intense. This wasn't just a legal strategy anymore, it was a moral one. The hearth-breaking pain of her betrayal was still raw, but now it was layered with the complex sadness of human weakness. I had to decide, was it ultimate victory, or was it healing? And what did true justice look like? Now that I knew the full, complicated truth, the decision would shape not only my future, but hers as well. The settlement offer loomed large, a tantalizing promise of peace and financial security. Mr. Henderson laid out the terms again, patiently, emphasizing the pros: guaranteed money, an end to the public scrutiny, the ability to move on with my life and right. He reminded me of the cons of a full trial: unpredictable jury, emotional drain, even more public airing of my life, and the painful details of the theft. My gut clenched. Was it enough? Was a significant portion of the royalties and a vague acknowledgement of my contribution enough for the years of anguish, the stolen dreams, the brutal public backlash I had endured? My initial fiery anger screamed, "No! Make her pay. Expose everything." But then I thought of Sarah's desperation, the medical debt, the last chance contract. It didn't make her theft right, but it did make it less cartoonishly evil. It made it human, and that made the choice infinitely harder. Did I want to be the one to push a desperate woman into absolute ruin? This was the hearth-breaking decision. It wasn't just about winning. It was about what kind of victory I wanted, and what kind of person I wanted to be. I could crucify her in court, reveal every humiliating detail of her financial collapse, ensure her career was utterly destroyed, her reputation irrevocably shattered. Or I could take the settlement, take my money and walk away, leaving her to pick up the pieces, however few there might be. I talked to Lena. She listened patiently, as always. "Alex," she said, her voice soft, "you've been through so much. This battle has consumed you. Is total public humiliation for her worth more of your life, more of your peace?" She was right. The lawsuit had become an obsession, a black hole sucking up all my energy, all my creative impulse. I hadn't written a single new word in months, paralyzed by the stress and the need to fight. My identity had shifted from writer to plagiarism victim. Was that what I wanted to be defined by? I looked at my original notes for The Celestial Librarian, my true creation. It was a beautiful, intricate world. But I knew, deep down, that even if I won this case and finally got to write it, it would forever be tainted by Sarah's version, by the bitter battle we had fought. It would be my story, yes, but it would also be a monument to a painful betrayal. What I craved more than anything was to write again. Create something new, something untainted, something that was entirely unequivocally mine. Could I do that if I was still consumed by this fight, by the desire for total vengeance? The settlement offered freedom, not just financial, but creative freedom. It offered the space to heal, to breathe, to find my own voice again, without the constant shadow of litigation. I met with Mr. Henderson one last time, before making my final decision. He presented the evidence one more time. The voice memo, Eleanor's testimony, the email, the overwhelming parallels in the book. He made it clear that we had an excellent chance of winning at trial. You could get everything, Alex, all of it, and she would be completely exposed. I looked at the meticulous file on his desk, the mountain of proof. The truth was on my side, but was winning at any cost truly winning? What if, I asked him, my voice hoarse, what if the settlement included a clause that explicitly stated the book was based on my original concept? Even if it wasn't a full acknowledgement of outright theft. Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. That's a new demand. She'd hate that. It's a public admission, even if it's softened. I don't need her career to be obliterated, I said. the words feeling surprisingly liberating as I spoke them. But I needed truth to be part of the record. Not just money, my integrity, my story. He nodded slowly. We can push for that. It adds a layer of complexity, but it's achievable, especially given the leverage we have. The decision crystallized. I wouldn't seek total annihilation. I would seek validation and the means to move forward. I would take the settlement, but with an amended clause that spoke to the truth, however subtly. It was a compromise, yes, but one that felt right. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my peace, my future, and my right to create without fear. It was a different kind of victory, a quieter, more personal one. It meant I was strong enough to walk away, to choose healing over total destruction, even for someone who had hurt me so deeply. The long, arduous battle was finally nearing its end, and I was ready for it to be over. The settlement was finalized 3 weeks later. The amended clause was accepted after intense negotiation. Sarah Vance would make a small public statement acknowledging my significant contribution to the core concept and thematic elements of Whispers of the Forgotten Star. It wasn't the full blazing admission of theft I'd once craved, but it was enough. It was an official, legal acknowledgement that my ideas were the foundation of her success. And the money was substantial, enough to provide a solid foundation for my future. The royalties, after being frozen for months, were finally released, a significant portion flowing into my account. It was surreal to see that number, an amount I could only have dreamed of just a year ago. It wasn't just money, it was free. The fallout for Sarah Vance was severe, even without a full trial. The settlement itself, coupled with the leaked information about her financial struggles and the evasive testimony, was enough. Public statement, however carefully worded, confirmed enough suspicion that her carefully crafted image shattered. Her publisher dropped her for future books. Her literary agent, a powerful figure, publicly parted ways with her. The reviews for Whispers of the Forgotten Star were retroactively re-evaluated, tainted by the plagiarism scandal. Her next book, if she ever wrote one, would be dead on arrival. She wouldn't be destroyed, but her career as a best-selling author was effectively over. I saw a paparazzi photo of her once, leaving a building. She looked gaunt, her eyes shadowed, her public mask finally gone. There was no triumph in me as I looked at it, only a quiet, somber understanding. She had paid a heavy price for her desperation and her choices. For me, the immediate aftermath was a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The fight was over. The adrenaline that had fueled me for so long dissipated, leaving a quiet space. But that space wasn't empty for long. I bought a small, quiet house outside the city, a place with a large window overlooking a garden filled with light. It wasn't a lavish mansion, but it was mine, and it felt like a sanctuary. I paid off my debts. I set up a writing studio, simple and uncluttered. The first few weeks, I just rested. I walked. I read books for pleasure, not for comparison or analysis. And slowly, gently, the urge to write returned. Not the celestial librarian. That story, while still dear to my heart, now felt like a relic of a past battle. It was time for something new. Completely different idea had been simmering in the quiet moments of the lawsuit. A story about resilience, about finding light in unexpected places, about the quiet magic of everyday life. It was a story born of my own experience of hitting rock bottom and finding the strength to fight for myself. It was my story, truly and deeply, from the ground up. I started writing. Slowly at first, tentative words, then sentences, then paragraphs. And with each word I felt a familiar joy, purer than before, because it was untainted by fear or betrayal. This time, I wasn't writing for validation or success. I was writing for myself. The healing process was long. The scars of the betrayal, the public scrutiny, and the emotional toll would always be there. But they were no longer gaping wounds. They were reminders of what I had overcome, of the strength I didn't know I possessed. I had learned to trust my instincts, to value my own work, and to stand up for myself. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, became a friend. He was more than just legal counsel. He was a silent supporter through the darkest times. He helped me navigate the new landscape of my life, advising me not just on legal matters, but on building a sustainable creative future. I didn't seek fame. I didn't chase headlines. I found solace in the quiet rhythm of writing, in the certainty that the words on the page were truly, unequivocally mine. The experience had forever changed me, stripped away my naivety, but it had also forged a stronger, more resilient artist. The story of the celestial librarian would always be a part of me, a testament to a stolen dream and a hard-won fight for justice. But it was no longer the defining chapter of my life. That chapter was behind me. The blank pages of my new notebook beckoned, filled with the promise of stories yet to be told. Stories that would finally, truly be my own. The future, for the first time in a long time, felt wide open and full of possibility. And that, more than any royalty check, was the ultimate triumph.